based on a number of different things, including a series of articles that I wrote on my website called Welcome to the Unveiling. And I'm definitely going to get into some other subjects which relates to all this, including current events. So yeah, I know it's been a while since I've done a video like this. In fact, I think the last time I did a video was like this was back in spring of last year when I first published my book, The Sun Lady Unveiled. And speaking of which, of course, this is an image of the Sun Lady, and of course, that's the woman clothed with the sun from the book of Revelation, chapter 12. And I wrote about uh, this very subject in this book that I wrote uh, from 2017. And when I published it back in 2020, that's when, of course, the pandemic first emerged. But uh, but yeah, so you can actually find the paperback version of my book now. I just put that out recently, so you definitely have options, or options rather. And if you have read my book, feel free to leave a review. So yeah, so that's enough of my housekeeping there. But going back to the subject at hand, so yeah, to this article that I wrote. This is like the fourth entry and conclusion of the series of articles. So I'm gonna approach all this from in a very non-linear format. But yeah, I get into this uh, solar goddess Suna in here and how she is connected to Ragnarok, which is the Germanic version of the apocalypse or Armageddon. So, and of course, here's her being about to be eaten by the wolf Fenrir, and of course, Fenrir is the wolf that appears at Ragnarok rather. Um, and then, so I get into, of course, Tracy Twyman, who, if you followed my work, uh, she and I covered a book about the subject of Baphomet, right? But but the Sun Lady book has nothing, was very little to do with that book. But but there are some connections with some of the themes expressed in the earlier book that I covered with Tracy. But in the Sun Lady book, I get into all kinds of different things. But of course, the Book of Revelation uh, was eventually, of course, included in the canon. But what I actually found out about the Book of Revelation was that when it was added to the canon, it was actually added from one specific vote uh, because it was a very split vote in the councils that were, or the church councils that were working on the final version of the Bible, quote, or final with quotation marks rather, of course. But and of course, the Book of Revelation was really used was supposedly back then they were just saying that you should only use it for prayer and liturgical rites and such, but and not to base your theology on the entire thing though. So, but anyway, uh, so yeah, I get into Tracy's work here with genuflect. So I'm not going to read everything verbatim here, but I also get into this Alan guy, this yeah Alan Greenfield's The Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, and I quote it, and I talk about, or I'm sorry, he talks about Aleister Crowley and how he actually encountered the Sun Lady through scrying. Now, if you don't know what scrying is, that's this magical practice of actually channeling different entities through mirrors and such, where you actually encounter them. So basically, the point of doing that is to exercise your clairvoyance, basically. Not that I support such things. I mean, I personally don't really do that kind of thing. I mean, in fact, I don't really do many rituals at all. I mean, a lot of my own stuff is just really just more on prayer, rather. But anyway, uh, but or sorry, Greenfield gets into Crowley stuff, and of course, if you don't know who Aleister Crowley is, I mean, all you gotta do is Google the guy. But he's of course the quintessential magician. He's of course the founder of the religion of Thelema and such. Of course, he's also connected with the OTO and some other group, uh, the Order of the Silver Star, I think. Yeah. But anyway, so uh, Greenfield gets into this vision that Crowley had of the Sun Lady, and I'll just quote a little bit from his channeling. I think he talks about this in The Vision of the Voice. I think that's the name of the book, but it says here, and Crowley had this vision of her where he says that, and this place is nothing but the body of a woman. It is impossible to say anything about her. She is naked. Her whole body is covered with fine gold hairs that are electric flames, that are the spirits of mighty and terrible angels, whose breastplates are scales of her skin. The hair of her head that flows down to her feet is the very light of God Himself. And then he also talks about Crowley and how he's basically in this gigantic UFO where he says that the chamber, he's like in this tower, rather. Uh, but I think the author, Greenfield, compares it to a UFO in the book. Uh, the Secret Rituals of Men in Black, of course. But yeah, he talks about all kinds of crazy stuff. And then of course, he's the holy table that uh, John Dee and Edward Kelly were using to contact these angels. And of course, they received all sorts of communications from them, which of course you can also find online. And again, I know I'm not saying that people should do this kind of thing because, and of course, you have to approach these things with some due caution, of course. And then, of course, I compare this Enochian table with the CERN Stargate because that's what it basically is. It's a portal to another dimension, another parallel universe, basically. And of course, here's Saturn holding a Stargate or a wheel of fate, and the whole idea of the Wheel of Fortune comes from this, as well as the goddess Fortuna, who also holds the Wheel of Fate as well, or Wheel of Fortune rather. Yeah, and I get into all that in my book, The Sunlight Unveiled, very in depth actually. Of course, this is the CERN logo for the Alice Project, and then I get into Tracy's work about hidden hyperspace kingdoms and CERN and how they're actually trying to create a new artificial universe or create a new one on top of this one. I know it sounds kind of crazy, uh, but yeah, I mean, I get into all kinds of stuff in this article. I get into what we call the rapture. I mean, I personally I don't know if there is going to be a rapture anytime soon. I kind of doubt it, but you never know. But I'm just saying, I'm just reporting what other people are talking or saying as well. This splitting of reality that we're currently uh, experiencing, I think, and that may be what we call the so-called rapture, you know. And of course, that connects with the this Illuminati playing card, uh, with this the Earth splitting open and the tape running out, right? So yeah, you can read that for yourself on my website. And then, of course, this is a clip that I posted on my website as well. And I'll play a little bit of Klaus Schwab. He's the figurehead of the World Economic Forum, if you don't know who he is. And I'll play a little bit of him now. So let's see. Hopefully it'll play.
Um, when we look at the tremendous challenge which we have in creating this great reset public, um, I think we are at a rupture point where I think we are at a rupture point.
Yeah, so there you have it. Schwab. Yeah, fuck that guy. But anyway, yeah, then here's another tweet that I posted on my blog from Nick Hinton, and that he talks about all this stuff as well, quite in depth on his blog or his Twitter rather. Uh, then of course, yeah, I talk about that as well as the idea of that we're, of course, we've entered into the age of Aquarius, and of course, when the Book of Revelation talks about the new heavens and new earth, I mean, I do suspect that will happen at some point. Probably after some sort of cataclysmic event. And then, or here's a signature of Barack Obama. Kind of, kind of connects to the idea of the Build Back Better idea. That if you see all these different world politicians keep touting, like Biden, of course, and of course, if you've been following current events with, of course, being jabbed and getting the VAX. Um, I mean, one can easily connect that with this quotation from the Book of Revelation. Of course, that's of course Baphomet, and of course he's holding the sort of the peace sign. I think there's a specific term for that. I think it's called the Manio sign, something like that. Uh, but yeah, I mean, going back to the idea of the rapture, though, I don't know. I mean, I kind of I kind of suspect that I think I don't. Well, I suspect that it probably won't happen anytime soon. In fact, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've become sort of like a hardened skeptic over the years from all the failed predictions of of Christ's return and other end time prophecies. Now, that being said, I do believe that a lot of current events are mirroring Bible prophecy. But I think that has more to do with like the synchronistic historical reoccurrence than literal prophetic fulfillment. And you see that sort of thing happen even with current events of like Corona. And of course, Corona just means crown, and you see that in Revelation as well with the white horse, the crown and conquering white horse that is. So, and of course, this great reset that they're trying to impose upon the planet, or what we call or what they call rather, the New World Order. Uh, Now they're trying to unfold or roll out this social credit system, and of course all these mandatory vaccines, right? So one can easily connect that with what we see in the emergence of the beast of Revelation. But I also think that all authoritarian systems have spiritual ties to the beast, and what we call the Antichrist of Revelation. I mean, that was obviously meant to be Nero, Caesar, but of course there are later incarnations of that same sort of vibe, or sort of spirit of Nero, rather. So I do think, history is sort of this reoccurring cycle of infinitely repeating events. So what happened with the Nazis and the rise of Hitler can also be connected with what we see now with the rise of Biden, and and not just Biden, but all these uh, corporate and state power. This meeting and fusion of corporate state power. I mean, that's literally out of Nazi Germany, And of course, this Sarah Grace posted this really timely quote from Revelation as well. It says, the light of the lamp shall not shine in you anymore, and the voice of the bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you anymore, for your merchants were the great men of the earth. Uh, for by your pharmakia all the nations were deceived. That's from Revelation 18:23, and that quote uh, was act or this yeah this Bible quote was really meant uh, to address mighty Babylon, the great Babylon. And of course, if you do go online, there's a lot of people connect uh, Babylon or the horror Babylon with the United States of America. Now, I don't know if we really are the horror Babylon, but I mean, one can definitely make that argument. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's this continual shift from periods of stability to periods of instability, which the one that we're in now. We're in economic turmoil, we're in political turmoil, we're in all kinds of turmoil. I mean, World War III. I mean, seems like that's about to pop off any time, but who knows? But order and chaos and creation, destruction. I mean, it just goes on and on eternally. It's kind of like an infinite loop. Uh, yeah, and I get into all that, of course, in my book as well. By the way, the idea that the end meets with the beginning. It's kind of like the Ouroboros. And of course, I connect, and I'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, I get into what we call the jab, and I connected the jab with the blue pill that you see in the Matrix, right? And of course, a mammon as well. Of course, I quote Tracy in depth. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Uh, but I mean, what we're experiencing now, though, I think definitely fits what uh, controllers have in mind. So I mean, it literally says, like in Crowley's writings, the Book of the Law, that the law of the strong is our law and the joy of the world, and it then also says that that basically here, let's see, where's that specific quote? Oh, the slaves shall serve. So who are the slaves? Well, I mean that's pretty much every man, woman, and child who's not part of the controllers or the so-called elite, right? But we're definitely in this new aeon. I mean, they consider now to be the aeon of Horus. And of course, Horus is the crown and conquering child. Now, yeah, this is a an image that I took from the TV show WandaVision that came out on Disney Plus. So that has a lot of occult connections there. And definitely watch this video from Comic Book Girl 19. She has some really interesting things to say about that show. So yeah, and then Nick Hinton kind of gets into that to the Sun Lady himself actually with this lady, this water bearer lady, and I think that definitely ties into the Sun Lady as well. Strangely enough. But yeah, and then so I'm not gonna read this whole thing. Oh, but before I get into that, I want to get into the first article of the series that I wrote. But here's a really good quote. It says from Manly Palmer Hall. He's a Freemason and a magician, or black magician, really. But he says that we can only escape from the world by outgrowing the world. Death may make man out of the world, but only wisdom can take the world out of man. As long as the human being is obsessed by worldliness, he will suffer from the karmic consequences of false allegiances. When, however, worldliness is transmuted into spiritual integrity, he is free even though he still dwells physically among worldly things. So, yeah, I definitely think that's true, for sure. Yeah, and then also talk about Manly P. Hall and how he connects with Revelation chapter 12 and 13 with a lot of the mystery teachings, especially we see in, or myths rather, and with, of course, with Gnosticism as well. So it gets into all that. But yeah, and then I also talk about this text called the Sefer uh, Zerubbabel, and which I think it's probably one of the more interesting apocalyptic texts that I've read that was not included in the Bible, but uh, but just it does read like the Book of Revelation for sure. Uh, so it has its own spin on that. It comes from the same type of genre of literature, you know. Uh, and of course, this is a symbol, or this is Isis. It comes from the Core Cosmo. It's a very fascinating text, by the way. It's a Hermetic text called Core Cosmo is just another word for the word. I think it's called the World of the Virgin or the Virgin of the World, or so, rather. But yeah, it's a very fascinating text, and I quote that text in this article as well. And here's meat. That's tit, the Titan or the Titanic goddess of wisdom. You could definitely find that uh, from Mysterium Baphometum Revelatum by Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall. Uh, but of course, unfortunately, Tracy Twyman's uh, article or articles based on that book and her translation of the book, unfortunately, won't really see the light of day. And I'll get into that in another video. It's just too much to get into now. But uh, but here's the interesting quote that's taken from the Virgin of the World. So, but you can read that, of course, on your own. But there's one thing I did want to get into. I'm not gonna get into all. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, of course. I'll also get into the Enochian Keys and John D. And of course, what we call here's the symbol of Mercury that connects to the Antichrist, and here's the scroll, the unveiling of the or the opening of the scrolls that we see in the Book of Revelation, or the seals rather. Uh, so yeah, and then let's see. Oh, here's a uh, really cool clip that I pulled from Hellraiser 2. So I just play a little bit. I'm not gonna play the whole thing, so it's kind of I don't want to get I don't want to play the whole clip, so it gets a little more disturbing. But anyway, towards the end of this article, I concluded that what we're experiencing in the present connects all the way back to what Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, and L. Ron Hubbard in their Babylon working ritual mentioned earlier in the series. So their ultimate goal was to herald the new aeon by opening up the doorways to other worlds and conjuring up astral entities from the abyss. This is something that's been developing for decades. It was just taking place so gradually that most people didn't notice it until we reached the climax of the ritual. Now it's too late to reverse the process. The doors have been opened, Leviathan has risen, and there's no going back. The darkest hour in human history is upon us, a tribulation period warned about in both the Old and New Testaments. So I don't know. I don't know if that is for a fact true, but I think we're definitely in that period of instability. Now, whether it is the Great Tribulation that we see in the Bible, I don't know, but it seems like it could be. And then I wrote here, they know it's over. Their 15 minutes is long past up. Back to fake wars. Now we go. All doctors might as well retire as all trust in them is shattered. The medical mafia will be judged with fire from heaven. Politics, healthcare, government, media, law, technology. They're all sacrificed everything on their altar of nothing. Or they sacrificed everything on their altar of nothing, rather. They have failed the world's civilization by their own hand. They are not worth shit and will not be remembered, not even a century later. They will have their long-awaited New World Order or Order of the Ages or Great Reset, which comes from Ra and Set. The ultra-terrestrials will return and we will create a proper Great Reset instead. Now, then wrote here, the thing is, this is their civilization society. It is not ours. It is certainly not mine. Let them take down something they took thousands of odd years to build. They're not capable of making anything better. They're not even a quarter of a percent of Rome achieved. So God's reset will come after. All the sacred books or holy books prophesy the coming global purge where millions, if not billions, will purge by war, epidemics, or by environmental means. Then I wrote here, but there also exists the prophecy of the return of the gods and the angels, along with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And with his return, the divine purge of the kings of the earth will follow, just as Psalm 2 predicts. Then Isaiah, quote Isaiah, and where it basically predicts that the divine power will return and utterly waste the world nations to oblivion. So the true reset has nothing to do with this wisdom of this world, but a holy wisdom that interpenetrates creation and its final deliverance. So, I mean, and of course, it kind of connects back with what I quoted from Manly P. Hall. So here's a really interesting quotation from Isaiah where it says, "In that day the Lord will punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. They'll be herded together like prisoners bound in a dungeon. They'll be shut up in a prison and be punished after many days. The moon will be dismayed and the sun ashamed, for the Lord Almighty will reign and on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before its elders with great glory." Wow. But yeah, I am actually working on a book, by the way, which will have number of different essays, which I published on my website, but I took down, but subsequently. But I'm still gonna put it in a series of articles on my in this book that I'm working on now. Now I don't know what the title is yet, but we'll see. So yeah, here's an image of the four archangels, Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, and Raphael. But yeah, and then let's see. There's one thing I did want to get into, of course, with Ragnarok and on all that stuff, and the War of the Gods, which I also detail in my book. the Sun Lady Unveiled, which but yeah, I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I definitely want to touch on a few different things before I get into that and what we see now with current events. So this is an article called by Brandon Smith from Zero Hedge. Why are globalists and governments so desperate for 100% vaccination rates? So he gets into all this stuff and he connects it with what we call the global, or what they call the so-called Great Reset. Great with quotation marks. Of course, there's nothing great about it, but but basically they're creating. We're basically involved in sort of gigantic experiment, a psyop experiment, and the unvaccinated are basically the control group. So this guy was saying that the reason why uh, they're trying to push for a large amount of vaccinations or 100% vaccination rates is that because they're on a timeline, they're on a very strict timeline, and so even though they have a end game for us, it could also mean that it's an end game for them as well. So, but I think there's a reason for that, and if people don't take the jab, then it just reveals that the jab that they've been pushing is, have very unfortunate uh, side effects for people who take that. And that, of course, I'm putting it very mildly, of course. And then here's a very interesting comment that I noticed from one guy on Zero Hedge. So he goes, anybody who has been paying attention realizes that there is something off with the way they are all of a sudden relentlessly putting or pushing this vaccine. Another thing that I've noticed is that the Dems are pushing all the BS when they know it's going to cost them the midterms. Either they're extremely stupid or know that something else is around the corner that's unstoppable. So, and that something else that's unstoppable, I think, is what we call, or what, or of course, the Germans call Ragnarok, or the War of the Gods, the Twilight of the Gods. So I'm going to go back to my article here that I wrote. Actually, let's go back to the main website. Let's see. So I want to go to part three, and I get into all. Yeah, so I'm going to skip this part into. Oh wait, this is a really interesting article that I wrote as well. It's called St. Patrick: Fake Realities in the Age of Saturn. So you can read that for yourself, of course. So here's Crown Cruach, who's sort of like a Titan. He's like an Irish equivalent of a Saturn. He's sort of like a worm, old one kind of creature. Um, but yeah, you can look at that as well for yourself. But there's one thing I did want to touch on. So of course, the apocalypse. The word apocalypse just means unveiling or uncovering or revelation. So I definitely get into why I think that's important. Uh, so it says here, so what exactly does this uncovering or unveiling entail exactly? I think it has to do with more the artificial nature of this reality we inhabit, especially now. Uh, so, so actually, let me skip down here. So I go, uh, so I talk about, of course, President Joe Biden and this green screen mishap that happened. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just play it a little bit here. Of course, there's that green screen.
Not at the moment.
Uh, so ridiculous. It's like we live in an age of lies and fabrication where deceit is the norm and truth is basically punished. Truth is lying naked in the street. But yeah, so I basically say that this just Joe Biden character, he's basically kind of like the emperor with no clothes, or like the Wizard of Oz. So I think this idea of him being some sort of fake ruler, this signals the idea that any news story has the potential of being generated by deepfake video effects, and no one will be able to distinguish between fake news and reality. I also suspect that this is signaling something even greater, which will cascade into a domino effect of the crashing down of the current house of cards, the same one which we were chosen to bear upon our shoulders, like Atlas, kind of like what Crowley wrote about the slaves shall serve. So will we shrug it all off like the plus ultra elite have chosen to do so in efforts to bust out of the matrix through Mithraic and Saturnine ritual magic? What then? I also suspect we won't have a Philip K. Dick or William Gibson ending way past technocratic rule and arcologies, fully into the end times to return of the gods, and whether the new aeon awaits. It's also past the fake UFO reveal and also into the super spectrum and the collapse of the eighth tower, as described by the 14 writer John A. Keel. And of course, this is the tower card from the tarot, or the Thoth deck of Crowley, rather. Uh, but then there's a couple things also want to get into as well. This is of course the part three of my article series of articles that I wrote. So I'll get into, of course, this Jupiter and Saturn conjunction that happened back in this past winter, back in December. Uh, so yeah, that's the whole insurrection, quote unquote, that happened connects to that. Of course, there's that tunnel opening ceremony. And if you haven't watched that clip, I mean, I think that clip is what is when I actually really started to question a number of different things. But I mean, that wasn't. I mean, I've read about all this stuff long before QAnon entered the scene. But anyway, uh, so I get into the tarot in these series of articles. I get into the Empress and what that means and how it connects to the Sun Lady. And of course, I'll leave that to you to read. Uh, of course, here's the world the world tarot card. Uh, now, the reason why I even posted that, I think, because it reminds me of Ion, right? And Ion is this lion-headed god that you see in Orphic and Greek mythology. But here's the human version of Ion, right? He's the god of eternal time, basically. And it kind of looks. It says here the world tarot card looks like Ion, a female Mithra, surrounded by four living creatures of Ezekiel and Revelation. So, well, I'm gonna play a little bit of that. Uh, well, I'm not gonna play this, but you can, of course, watch that on my website. You can play it yourself. But I get into, of course, Babylon a little more in depth in this article. And of course, Babylon is the whore Babylon is the one that holds her fluids of fornication in her cup, right? It's kind of like sex magic. She's the infernal goddess of sex magic. Here's a lust card from Crowley's deck. Uh, then I said here about the lust card, the Thoth tarot deck symbolizes the demiurge, the child of chaos. It is the lion-headed serpent, the Gnostic Chinimbus, from the lust of the leonine beast, which comes forth from the descent into matter of Tiamat. Genesis is the act of lust. Babylon completes the cycle of the demiurge. The Virgin Mary connects Virgo, who gave birth to the fisherman Pisces. So Babylon, as Leo, fulfills a role with Aquarius. So Virgo is the opposite sign of Pisces, and Leo the opposite of Aquarius. She is the hidden side of our age of wormwood. Uh, and here's the fifth pinnacle of Mars from the Key of Solomon. Uh, I think the second pinnacle of Mars has a lot to do with healing, by the way, protection. So this is basically protection magic. If you're into that sort of thing. Uh, I posted this all this only because I thought it was just pretty fascinating. I personally don't practice this kind of thing myself. I mean, you could definitely find other YouTube channels that talk about all this stuff more in depth if you do want to uh, research it. But anyway, then I get into another pinnacle that I found of the sun, and that connects to the figure of Yahweh or El Shaddai, and he looks kind of like Bacchus or Moses here, or Dionysus. I mean, I kind of figured that Moses is just the Jewish version of Dionysus, rather. This is Yahweh, of course, but yeah, of course, his the symbol, or is that the tetragrammaton is basically used in ritual magic to control both angels and demons. Then, of course, I get into John Dee again with what Tracy wrote about him specifically. That we in this idea that we live in John Dee's world or John Dee's universe. So, and of course, that connects to this Rockefeller Foundation report that they published in 2010, and this idea of the Green New Deal, the Great Reset, and that sort of thing, the new Aeon. Uh, and I get into this idea that that maybe John Dee really did help bring about this whole thing, this whole reality that we're living through now. But yeah, and then so I'm gonna play. So I'm gonna kind of skip all of this, but I'm gonna play something from this YouTube channel. It's called Ancient Mystery. So let's see here. I'm gonna skip. Oh, and there's one thing I did want to get into this a little bit. So this is, of course, these are images taken from the TV show Childhood's End, and that's basically about these group of these aliens called the overseers or the overlords rather, but they look like devils. And so then I connect all that stuff with Ragnarok and the Book of Revelation and how eventually I think we're all gonna face that at one point. I mean, and of course if you pay attention to what we see in online with all these different people talking about disclosure or soft disclosure. I mean, the government has basically soft disclosed about the existence of aliens and such, uh, but if you read people like John Keel, they'll tell you, what the deal is with that. What we call aliens are just basically maybe just one the same with the fallen angels and Nephilim race that you see from the Book of Enoch, right? Uh, but yeah, I'm gonna play a little bit from this YouTuber called Ancient Mystery. So, oops,
Expansion of the
let's go back. Here we go. And after this, I'm gonna play another clip from Tracy.
There is, in the legends of the Scandinavians, a marvelous record of the coming of the comet. It has been repeated, generation after generation, translated into all languages, commented on, criticized, but never truly understood. It has been regarded as a wild, unmeaning rhapsody of words, a riddle, or as a premonition of some future Earth catastrophe. But just look at it, the very name is significant. According to Professor Anderson's etymology of the word, Ragnarok means the darkness of the gods. From the word rain, meaning gods, and rocker, meaning darkness. That would be the rock and the flood of the gods. That would also be the rain in the reign of the empire. Let us not forget that Odin in High German is Zu, and the darkness, the black bird, is also named Zu, alternatively known as Rock. Very similar to Loki and Odin, who share the name Othella. Odin and Zu share the name Zu, meaning the darkness. But rock in this context may more properly be derived from the Icelandic, Danish and Swedish green, a rain, and rock, smoke or dust, and it may mean the rain of dust, for the clay in our ground first came as dust. It is described in some Indian legends as ashes. First there is, as in the traditions of the Druids, the story of an age of crime. This was after the fall of rock. The Vala looks upon the world, and, as the Elder Edda tells us, there saw she wade in the heavy streams, men, foul, murderers, and perjurers. And them whose others' wives seduce to sin. Brothers slay brothers, sisters, children, shed each other's blood. Hard is the world, sensual sin grows huge. There are sword ages, axe ages, shields are cleft in twain. Storm ages, murder ages, till the world falls dead, and men no longer spare or pity one another. The world has ripened for destruction, and Ragnarok, the darkness of the gods, or the reign of dust and ashes, comes to complete the work. The whole story is told with the utmost detail, and we shall see that it agrees in almost every particular, with what reason assures us that this event must have happened. There are 3 winters or years during which great wars rage over the world. Mankind has reached a climax of wickedness. Doubtless that it was, as it is now, highly civilized in some regions, while still barbarian in others. Then what happens next will seem like a great miracle. The wolf devours the sun, and this will seem like a great loss. That is, the comet strikes the sun, or approaches so close to it that it seems to do so. The other wolf devours the moon, and this too will cause great mischief. Isn't it Odin that has 2 wolves? In Norse mythology, Geri and Freki, from Old Norse, both meaning the ravenous or greedy one. They are the 2 wolves which are said to accompany the god Odin. There is a tale of 2 wolves, but there appear to be three. We have seen that the comets often come in couples or triplets. The stars shall be hurled from the heaven. This refers to the blazing debris of the comet falling to earth. Then it shall come to pass that the earth will shake so violently that the trees will be torn up by the roots. The mountains will topple down, and all bonds and fetters will be broken and snapped. Chaos has come again. How closely does all this agree with Hesiod's description of the shaking of the earth and the universal conflict of nature? The Fenris wolf gets loose. The Fenris wolf is the name of one of the comets. The sea rushes over the earth, for the Midgard serpent writhes in giant rage and seeks to gain the land. The Midgard serpent is the name of another comet. It strives to reach the earth. Its proximity disturbs the oceans. And then follows an inexplicable piece of mythology. The ship that is called Naglfar also becomes loose. This would be the Ark, wouldn't it? But here it is made from the nails of dead men. Wherefore it is worth warning that when a man dies, he supplies a large amount of materials for the building of this ship. This is one very dark vessel, which both gods and men wish that it may be finished as late as possible. But during this great flood, Naglfar gets afloat. The giant Hirm is the steersman. The Fenris wolf advances with a wide open mouth. The upper jaw reaches to the heaven, and the lower jaw is on the earth. That is to say, the comet extends from the earth to the sun. He would open it wider if he had room. Fire flashes from his eyes and nostrils. Another writer says, the Midgard serpent vomits forth venom, defiling all the air and the sea. He is very terrible, and places himself side by side with the wolf. The two comets move together, and they give out poison. In the midst of the clash and din, the heavens are rent in twain, and the sons of Muspelheim come riding through the opening. Muspelheim, according to Professor Anderson, means the Day of Judgment. Muspel signifies an abode of fire, peopled by fiends. So that this passage means that the heavens are split open, or appear to be, by the great shining comet, or comets, striking the earth. It is a world of fire. It is the day of judgment. Surtur rides first, and before him and after him, flames of burning fire. Surtur is a demon associated with the comet. He is the same as the destructive god of the ancient Egyptians, who destroys the sun. It may mean the blazing nucleus of the comet. He has a very good sword that shines brighter than the sun. Where have we seen that before? I can't put my finger on it. As they ride over the Bifrost, it breaks into pieces. The Bifrost, we shall have reason to see hereafter, that it was a prolongation of land westward from Europe, which connected the British Islands with the island home of the gods, or a godlike race of men. There are geological proofs that such a land once existed. A writer, Thomas Butler Gunn, in an Old English publication, says, Tennyson's Voyage of Maelduin is a magnificent allegorical expansion of the idea, and this distinction has also finally commemorated the old belief.
So yeah, and the reason why I even played that this clip was because I definitely think something like this is going to happen. I'm not sure about this year, but I think this whole thing about but the reason why I even played that was because I do think something is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be Ragnarok per se, but I don't know. Just I mean, we are in this era of instability and chaos, so anything can happen. And there's a guy by the name of Paul LaViolette, and he wrote a book called Earth Under Fire, and he gets into this stuff as well. And the reason why Ragnarok even happens is because of these galactic cosmic superwaves that happen periodically every 26,000 years. So the last one that happened was during the Ice Age, and that was basically the last Ragnarok. So there's actually two Ragnaroks. So this Ragnarok that's going to happen eventually will be the second, of course. And of course, this is Odin with the what's his face, some giant or titan that he's talking with. And then here's a picture of the Valkyries, which are basically Norse angels. Uh, and I do talk about, of course, the god Odin in my other articles that I've written previously. In the Sun Lady Tales, which you can also find online. And I've been actually meaning to work on a sequel video to the first one that I did called the Sun Lady Tales, but just never got around to do it. But unfortunately, uh, but if you don't know who Odin is, of course, he is the Germanic uh, god of wisdom and knowledge, as well as the being a god of war. Uh, he's so let me scroll down here to find a picture of him. Let's see. Come on. Oh, and this is Ion, of course. This is the Leon Tessiphaline, the lion-headed god. And of course, she's the beast of Revelation from chapter 13. Then let's see. Okay, where? See, oh my God, I posted so many different images on here. Okay. Oh, so yeah, here's Odin. He's riding his white horse in Ragnarok. There's Thor and uh, Jormander. He's the the dragon or the serpent, and of course that's Marduk. Uh, and then of course that's Marduk and Tiamat. And then we have Yahweh and Leviathan. But here's Odin who sacrifices himself to himself so he can gain the knowledge of the runes or the magic of the underworld, essentially. So, uh, but anyway, I'm not going to get too much into all this stuff, but you could definitely find all this article on my website. Uh, but there's one thing I did want to get into. Uh, is this idea of Atlantis. Uh, this is taken from a website called atlan.org, but and the reason why I'm even talking about this is because connects with that tower tarot card that I posted on my website that you just saw earlier. So I'm going to read it here. It says the name of Atlantis ultimately derives from the Sanskrit Atla, the name of the Hindu paradise sunken under the seas and turned infernal. So Attila was, as we argue elsewhere, the true archetypal of Atlantis, or archetype of Atlantis. The word Attila also means watchtower. Hmm. And also derived probably via the Arabic Hiram Abif, or from the Arabic rather. So that's a different sentence. So Hiram Abif was the master architect of the Temple of Solomon, as well as a notorious founder of Freemasonry, a tradition that dates back to Atlantis itself. The thunderbolt destroying the tower indeed represents the Vajra, itself an allegory of the huge volcanism which destroyed Atlantis twice in a row. The symbolism is repeated infinitely everywhere, or everywhere infinitely repeated rather, in quaint variants which complement each other and which leave little room for doubting. They all refer to Atlantis Eden and its destruction by uh, the Vajra. In the Rig Veda, this fall of the Vajra is represented by the one of the Angrius Dadhyanch, and the Angrius, whose name also literally means angel, is in fact the archetype of the fallen angel. This story is told in Revelation as the one of Lucifer and Michael who pursued their angelic unending war here on earth, now as the two beasts. So this war indeed derives directly from the Hindu, one of the gods and the devils, or Devas and Asuras, respectively, led by Skanda, uh, Kartikeya, Ganesha, for definitely mangling that word, their name, their respective generalismos, whatever that means. We tell the story in detail elsewhere, blah 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 blah. Anyway, but the reason why I even get into all that is because in my articles I also talk about the Archangel Michael. Well, here's a really interesting, uh, timely quotes taken from the Bible. It talks about the movers and shakers of the Great Reset, which you can find on my online. But I like this one where it says, "For all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, so that there is no place clean." So they're talking about these guys. They're the ones that vomit on their tables, you know. They're that disgusting before God, you know, or the gods. Uh, and let's see, and then let's see, then let's. This is one. There's another one that I thought was pretty interesting. Let's see. Well, like I like this one. Don't call everything conspiracy like they do, and don't live in dread of what frightens them. Make the Lord of Heaven's armies holy in your life. He is the one you should fear. He is the one who should make you tremble. And that's true, you know. So we shouldn't idolize these people. We should idolize, you know, the principle of all life, the one that, you know, created this universe, you know. So, and here's an image of course, you know, Pelosi and I don't know, all the Democrats or other rhinos worshiping Molech. But oh yeah, here's Hiram Abiff, and here's all the Masonic brothers kneeling before the dead Hiram Abiff, and he's basically the Masonic Antichrist, essentially, the Masonic Messiah. But of course, if you interpret that Masonic Messiah, he kind of basically is the Antichrist. So yeah, and then here's an image of the War of the Gods, and the reason why I even called the war, why I'm even talking about the War of the Gods, because I think it all connects to that super wave that Paul the Violet talks about, and I think that also connects with the so-called rapture. And I mean, I don't know if I, and again, I don't know if I really believe in what we call the rapture doctrine, uh, because you know, if you look at uh, what is being taught as being the so-called rapture, I mean, I don't know. It's like I don't really believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, you know. And the reason why I even say that is because, well, I mean, the Bible doesn't really teach it. You know, I think some evangelists actually invented that doctrine back in the 17th and 18th century by merging Paul's account of the second coming in First Thessalonians with Revelation's 7-year tribulation period. And you know, early Christians like Paul believed appeared to believe that Jesus was coming back within their own lifetime. And when that didn't happen, later Christians wrote Revelation and some of that other late New Testament texts like Second Peter to explain why it hadn't happened yet. So Revelation's explanation is that the Antichrist must come first. So Second Thessalonians actually says something similar. So now, if you also read, of course, Revelation chapter 3, the church is also uh, never mentioned again after that chapter as well. So I guess that could support some sort of rapture doctrine, but but the idea of a rapture, also happens throughout the Bible. You see that with Enoch, and Elijah, and even with Paul too, when he talks about being snatched away into the second heaven or third heavens. I think that's in Second Corinthians, if I remember correctly. But yeah, let me. I'm trying to find this one part of it that talks about Michael, and I'm gonna play a little clip from that talks about Michael in a minute. That I think just blew my mind, and I actually found that clip in preparation of this video. But yeah, I talk about this article from a guy named Paul D. It's from a website. Uh, I think it's called the Bible Explained or something like that. But it's on my website. Uh, I think it's called Does the Bible say that, or some to that effect. But he wrote a book or an article called Michael the Great Prince and Savior of Israel. And I may get into another video, but I actually had some personal experiences with Saint Michael as well. And but yeah, I'll get into it some other time. But here's what he wrote about this Prince of Light, where it says in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, he is the great prince prophesied to appear as a deliverer of Israel at the end of the present age. The war scroll of Qumran, written about a half century after Daniel, describes Michael as a prince of light, a warrior angel who will defeat the devil Belial and establish his own kingdom in heaven and on earth. This is the day appointed by him by the defeat and overthrow of the prince of the kingdom of wickedness, and he will send eternal succor to the company of his redeemed by the might of the princely angel, the kingdom of Michael. He will raise up the kingdom of Michael in the midst of the gods, and the realm of Israel in the midst of all flesh. And the Prince of Light thou hast appointed from the ancient times to come to our support. All the sons of righteousness are in his hand, and all the spirits of truth are under his dominion. But Belial, the angel of malevolence, thou hast created for the pit. His rule is in darkness, and his purpose is to bring about wickedness and iniquity. And then I talk about, or he talks about, according to this is what he says. According to my reading, most scholars agree that Michael and Melchizedek were regarded as two names of the same Prince of Light by the authors of many of the Qumran scrolls. And what's interesting is that Michael and Metatron also have hold the same or similar office. So Metatron, I think, is more like a title, and Metatron, of course, is the angel that you see in the Book of Enoch, uh, the third Book of Enoch, rather. I think he's in the second one too, but Enoch is the one who ascends to heaven. He's eventually transformed into Metatron. But then I wrote, following the logic and takeaway message from the author, perhaps Jesus, Michael, Metatron, and Melchizedek are all different facets or incarnations of the Logos. And the physical world forces them to break into different frequencies like light through a prism of fractals. So, and I mean that kind of sort of explains why people like the Seventh-day Adventists or Jehovah's Witness claim that Michael is the same as Jesus. So there's I think a lot of reasons for why people think that, even though that's not really exactly correct, but I can see the reason why people would think that anyway. But yeah, uh, But yeah, there's one. I want to play this real quick here. But before I even get to that, there's so many different things I want to touch on, but just so little time. Um, so this is idea of the apocastasis, right? And this connects to the idea of the apocalypse. And this is taken from a website that I found online that connects Carl Jung's terminology with Gnostic terminology. But it says here that apocastasis is the restoration of psychic wholeness. So this is what uh, Carl Jung writes. So he goes, or at least I think it's Carl Jung, but it says the old master saw the alchemical opus of the kind of apocastasis, the restoring of the initial state in an eschatological one. The end looks to the beginning, and contrawise. This is exactly what happens in the individuation process, whether it take the form of a Christian transformation, except ye become as little children, or Satori experience in Zen, or in the psychological process of development in which the original propensity to wholeness becomes a conscious happening. So, and then you can compare that with this Gnostic idea of the cosmic restoration of all the light particles that were spread out at the beginning uh, when Sophia fell from the pleroma. So Sophia, uh, along with Christ, become a sort of like a syzygy or like an alchemical fusion between male and female. And of course, you see those images on old, very old alchemical text. Then it says here, in the words of Heracleon, "And the wage of our Lord is the salvation and restoration, or apostasis, of those who are harvested, brought brought about by resting upon them." And then, yeah, and then Marcus the Gnostic, he talks about this restoration. So this apostasis really means restoration ultimately in uh, in Jungian terminology and in Gnosticism. And there's this Gospel of Thomas saying where Jesus goes, or this is what the disciples said to Jesus. So it says, "Tell us how our end will come to pass." So Jesus goes, you'll have laid, then have you laid bare the beginning, so that you are seeking the end. For the end will be where the beginning is. Blessed is the person who stands at the rest in the beginning. That's the apocastasis, right? And that person will be acquainted with the end and will not taste death. And of course, that connects with the book of Revelation, where Jesus says that, he is the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end, right? Uh, it's kind of like the Ouroboros symbol with the dragon eating its tail that you see in alchemical texts, including the text called the Pistis Sophia as well, which I think I'll get into another video. So again, another thing I want to get into. But I want to leave it here. I want to play one final clip here. So I think I'm going to do a part two, which I'll definitely eventually get into. But before I close out, I definitely want to leave you guys with this. This is taken from a website I found online called the Coptic Magical Pottery. But and the reason why I'm going to play this is because I think connects what I talk about on my website, the unveiling, or welcome to the unveiling, about Michael, right? And yeah, oh my God, there's so much to get into. But uh, here's an image. Before I play that, here's an image that I found from a blog. It's called Michael Moss, and this guy is really into doing creating altars for Saint Michael. And in my book, I also connect Michael with like the figures like even like the Demiurge and Mithras, and uh, Solomon, and of course this is like Solomonic magic, but yeah, pretty crazy. But I thought it was interesting what this guy was doing uh, and his experience with the Saint Michael. But anyway, I'm gonna go and play this clip here, and I'll close it out. And I think that'll be the end for this video. But I'm definitely gonna do a part two eventually, hopefully if time permits. So here I'm gonna play this part.
So why is this hymn attributed to Michael? And
Oh, this is basically a text called "A Praise of Archangel Michael." Uh, but yeah, I'm gonna play a little bit. So you can play. I'm gonna post the link to this interview about this text that was found. I think it was recently actually, but it comes from the 10th century. But yeah, I'm gonna play a little bit, and then I think that'll be that.
what is his role in this prayer, in this text?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. So, I mean, as I said, there's maybe some evidence, but maybe some suggestion that this might have been a text from a monastery dedicated to the Archangel Michael. So it might not just be an accident that it was copied by Deacon Johannes. In the colophon, it says, "I am Deacon Johannes, the servant of Michael." So the Archangel Michael, of course, has a very important role in Coptic or Egyptian Christianity. Of course, he's one of only two angels mentioned in the canonical Bible. The one being Mary. Sorry, not Mary. Sorry, the other one being Gabriel. There's a third one, Raphael, who's mentioned in the Book of Tobit, which is actually canonical in Egyptian Christianity. But Michael, along with Gabriel, is one of the most important angels, and Michael and Gabriel, and usually Raphael, are always mentioned in lists of the seven archangels, although the other ones often vary. So in the Bible, Michael is, I think, mentioned in the context of fighting the devil, and I suppose in Western Christianity, that's how we often imagine him, as a kind of warrior angel. But what's interesting is that in Egyptian Christianity, he's often seen as a kind of compassionate figure. So he has this status of being the most compassionate angel who is constantly working to help humankind. So some very interesting passages in various Coptic apocryphal texts. So these are texts which were composed at some point in Egypt, usually. In every case we think in Coptic, sometime between the 5th and, let's say, 9th centuries for the most part. They, generally speaking, describe or elaborate on stories or individuals from the Bible, but add more details. Three of these, which I thought I'd bring up just to quickly describe the role of Michael in Coptic Christianity. One of these is the investiture of Michael. This describes how Michael essentially received his exalted position in heaven. So the story basically tells about how when humankind was created, when Adam was created, the devil rebelled against God and refused to worship him. And so Michael cast the devil out of heaven and received the former status of the devil, who was previously the most exalted angel. The other text, which I thought I'd mention, is the Mysteries of John. This is a really interesting text, which essentially describes how the Apostle John was taken on a tour of creation by an angel and was shown all of these secret aspects of the workings of the cosmos. And the third one is Discourse on Michael, which is attributed to Timothy, the Archbishop of Alexandria. So these three texts all describe, in some ways, the role of Michael. So in the investiture, for example, it describes how the angels, they look on the earth and they see humankind sinning because the devil leads them astray, and the angels become angry at humans for being so sinful, and they want to strike down humans and kill them. But Michael stops them. So Michael commands them to be peaceful, to forgive humans, and not to be angry with them. So essentially, this is saying that if it wasn't for Michael, people would be being killed by angels constantly because of our sins. And in fact, the investiture of Michael goes even further than this and says that God the Father when he remembers the sins of humankind, he becomes angry with them and wants to exterminate them again. As he tried to do during the flood. But in fact, it's Michael who stops him. So Michael calls upon all of the angels, um, as he does as he does in the hymn of Michael, or the hymn of praise of Michael, and he prostrates himself before God and asks God to be merciful to humankind. And there's a very similar passage to this in the Mysteries. So it talks about in the Mysteries about how there's an angel of wrath who weeps tears of blood into a fountain. And this fountain seems to be the fountain that creates prosperity or dew upon the earth that allows plants to grow. And this angel of wrath is dripping tears of blood into it. But Michael stops him and wipes away the tears of blood from his eyes. And the Mysteries of John says that if it wasn't for Michael wiping away the tears of blood, there would be famine upon the earth. So again, Michael saves humankind not only from the wrath of angels and the wrath of God, but also from famine. In Egyptian Christianity specifically, Michael is believed to be responsible for the rise of the Nile. So every year, of course, before the building of the High Dam, the Nile used to flood, and the agriculture in Egypt was dependent upon this flooding. And the idea was that Michael and his angels, once again, every year, they would go and they would pray constantly to God to make the Nile flood. So once again, Michael is responsible specifically for the existence of agriculture in Egypt. If it wasn't for him, life in Egypt wouldn't be possible. And then finally, in the Discourse on Michael, attributed to Timothy, it describes how Michael not only helps human beings on earth, but even after they're dead, he flies to hell and he sees all of the sinners who are burning in the lake of fire, and he dips his wings into the lake of fire, and he brings out thousands of humans on each wing, and with them he flies to paradise. So Michael not only helps living humans stay safe from the wrath of God and from famine, he also then goes and rescues sinners from torments. So Michael is a very, very important angel in Egyptian Christianity, and this prayer seems to be kind of calling upon that reputation that he had as the angel who intercedes with God for mercy. So specifically in this prayer, he's interceding with God to help a specific person who might be sick or who might be afraid of demonic or magical influence.
And now what follows is Edward Love's reading of the Praise of Archangel Michael.
But yeah, you can read that stuff on your own or listen to that. But yeah, it gets into all kinds of different prayers invoking Michael and as well as Sabaoth and Jesus Christ. And Sabaoth, of course, is the another name for Yahweh, right? Uh, but oh, and just one more thing. So I did meant to mention this. I meant to talk about this earlier, but this is something called the Seekers After Smooth thing. So I do think that this connects with uh, these people who are leading the Great Reset, these controllers. And so basically, what they are is a group. So it's the name given to group referred to in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I think you also see this in I think Isaiah as well, if I remember correctly. But even though Wikipedia doesn't mention it, so it says the context within the Pesher Nahum describes seekers as an organized violent group that claims they can be responsible for numerous deaths. They are also blamed for their impression of others by misleading kings, princes, priests, and ordinary members of the nation. The seekers are also seen as traitors who act opposite of the divine plan. The view is that at the end of days, the seekers, after smooth things, will be unmasked rather, and despised. Their misleading will be over and will face punishment. So one punishment suggested in the temple scroll for those who oppose God is to be hanged on a tree until death. The group is most commonly identified with the Pharisees, though this identification is by no means certain. I mean, that wouldn't make sense though. since they did oppose Jesus, right? And likewise, the opposite. Um, Jesus opposed them. But then the seekers are believed to come from and reside in Jerusalem. So yeah, so basically, I think eventually we're gonna see these people hung from a tree, kind of like how Odin was hung from a tree. So all sacrifices, uh, or supposedly sacrifices, uh, or people who were hung from a tree or were is basically a sacrifice to Odin, uh, the Norse god, of course. And in part two, I'm gonna get to all kinds of other stuff as well. I'm gonna get more in depth with the War of the Gods, what that all means, because the War of the Gods, rather, you see that in not only in the Book of Revelation, in the Book of Enoch, we also see that in Greek mythology, especially. I mean, that's where it comes from, the Titan Maki. Uh, and of course Ragnarok. I mean, it's all connected. It's all connects to what we're going to see with this so-called super wave, what Paul Violet talks about. I think that's also connected with the rapture, quote unquote. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but we are in very crazy times. So, of course. So, but yeah, hopefully, guys, you enjoyed this. I know it was a really long video. It kind of was very long-winded there and pedantic, but I may split this up into a series of different videos because it's running was this the runtime of this video is almost an hour and 30 minutes. So, but anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this and you guys have a good one. Bye.